I'm doing all the talking. I'm doing all the talking. I'm doing all the talking, and I never repeat myself, myself,
Okay.
myself, myself.
Okay. For sitting down with me. I think it's definitely a book. When I stumbled over it, it's definitely a book that when I looked at it, I saw from Johannesburg to London, and I said, no ways. I definitely need to read this book. And the reason for this podcast is I really want to create awareness for people out there that's bullying younger generations. Because all that I see on social media is the fact that all this bullying is, and I'm hoping that through your book and through people that I actually interview on this podcast, I can inspire the younger kids to take on the next step in their life. You know what I mean? Never look back. Take on the obstacles like you took on the obstacles. In fact, my goal is now after this video is to inspire a young kid. He's actually going to go to the UK at the moment. He's trying to raise funds to go to the UK to play in the UK rugby. So hopefully I can get him on this podcast and we can hear his story and he can again motivate someone else to push through and just take that next step in life. So
Mm.
Terence, going forth, can you start from the beginning, where it started for you that motivated you to actually take on this journey?
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, I'm from an Irish family back in Cork, in Ireland, and my mom and dad were very fond of each other because clearly they were, because they had 17 children, not twins, just 17 children, one after the other. And I'm the youngest. And and when I was 15, I was 15 years of age before my family ever purchased a car, because we were from a very very poor family. We used to have to walk to school. We actually had to walk through fields, farmers' fields, and over little rivers to actually get to the school. So when I was 15 years of age, my one of my brothers bought a Hillman Imp, and the reason he bought a Hillman Imp was the next door neighbor who lived right next to us in the countryside. He used to rally Hillman Imps. And he told my brothers that these Hillman Imps were fantastic cars. Nathan, he lied, because they were a heap of rubbish. They were a heap of rubbish. They were probably the worst cars ever made in Britain. And I, first of all, raced cars in South Africa in the mid 80s, and I raced a Ford Capri. And after a couple of years racing the Ford Capri, I decided I'm going to actually prepare a racing Hillman Imp. So I bought a Hillman Imp and I started making a Hillman Imp race car. And then I bought another Hillman Imp, and I ended up buying quite a few Hillman Imps. So the car was turning 50 years old in 2013. And the members of the Imp Club, mainly in England, but they're all over the world, like me, I'm a member of the Imp Club, and they said, what should we do to celebrate for the Hillman Imp's 50th birthday in 2013? So this was now in 2010. So I phoned up the chairman in England one day and I said, Graham, my name is Terence. I think what I'll do for the Hillman Imp 50th birthday, I think I'll drive one of my Hillman Imps to Coventry. He said, that's a great idea, Terence. A lot of guys are going to be driving their Hillman Imps to Coventry. Which town will you be coming from? So I said, I'm coming from Randburg. He said, what? Randburg? Where's Randburg? I said, Randburg, just north of Johannesburg. He said, stop, stop. He said, no, no, you're not going to make. He said, you will never make it. To Africa and a bit of Asia, no, you're not going to make it. He said, please don't do it. You saw what happened to the two boys who tried to do the trip from London to Mongolia. I said, yes, but Graham, remember that those guys didn't prepare their car properly. It broke down halfway and they had to leave it in Uzbekistan. I'm going to prepare my car properly. But of course I didn't. You know what they say, the spirit is willing, but the flesh was weak. I tried to, but I just didn't do it properly. Anyway, I rushed. I ran out of time, and it was a big mess at the end. But eventually, I managed to get going, and so he was very very excited about the fact that we were going to drive from Johannesburg all the way to Coventry, north of London. And so that's basically why I did the trip.
Would you say you're the first person that done a trip like that?
No, a lot of people have done many trips up to Africa and to Europe with various modes of transport. A friend of mine who gave me good advice, Roger Pierce, he's done it 5 times. 5 times
Wow.
from South Africa to England. He's done it with an MG-BGT alone. He's done it with minis, the new mini. He's done it with a Rolls Royce. Anyway, so people do it on bicycles. People do it on motorbikes. But yeah, it still was a hell of an achievement, because I think I can honestly say that I did it in Britain's worst made car ever, the Hillman M.
And what about your the the sponsorship? Did the sponsorship come through that same company and they sponsored you for the
Look,
awareness and
I got a little bit of sponsorship. We basically had a few evenings at my restaurant, where I was running a restaurant at the time, and we did some auction. We got people to give us memorabilia and items that we could auction to friends of ours on an evening in my restaurant, and we ended up getting a certain amount of money from that. And then we decided to give our money to two main charities: the Save the Rhino Fund, and also the people that suffered from blindness. Because
okay.
when I was a kid, I actually lost the sight in my one eye. So
Oh wow.
all my life I've lived with only one eye working, and I
Wow.
thought, you know what? I've lived a charmed life. I've really lived a fantastic life, and I wanted to say, in my way of saying thank you to the good Lord, who actually allowed me to have a good life, sighted life. I decided, let me try and do something small for the people who are challenged with blindness.
Wow. So let's go to the day of leaving. You had some
Don't
brake
remind,
issues.
please don't remind me about it. Oh, if I could live my life again, if I could live my life again. So what happened? As I left my house, I had put 2 petrol tanks in the car to give myself a longer range. So I decided, let me just put an extra fuel tank in the front, on top of the other one, so that I would then not have issues with fuel if there was any fuel shortages in Africa, and mainly in Africa. And as I left my house, there was fuel leaking from the petrol tank in front of my house. So I said to Jeff, who was traveling with me, my co-pilot, I said, you know what, Jeff, I'm not going to use the tools in the car. Let me reverse back into the garage, and we'll use the tools in the garage. I don't want to unpack all the tools that we've prepared for the trip. He said, good idea. So then I put the car in reverse, but I couldn't find reverse. So then I said, Jeff, we can't find reverse. And if I start trying to fix it now, I might destroy the first gear and third gear, or second and fourth. You know, that's the way cars' gears set up. So I said, let's take a chance. Let's go. The car is light enough for us to push back if we get stuck. So we actually went from Johannesburg to London with no reverse in our car. And you know what? It was actually a good thing, because you know why? You know, when we got stuck with the big mess at the border in Botswana, and we had a problem with the police in Tanzania, and we were stuck in the mud in Kenya, and the hills in Ethiopia were just far too high for us to climb with a small car. You know, I said to Jeff, guess what? Have we got reverse? Is reverse working? And he said, Terence, you know reverse is not working. I said, well, whatever this problem is with the car, we need to fix it, because we can't go back. We got to keep going forward. Fix whatever this problem with the car is, or whoever's giving us drama on the border. Let's make sure we get through this, because we can't go back. We have to keep going forward. So it was actually a positive. So
Mm-hmm.
a negative became a positive.
And that's the way you should take life, is always turn the negative into a positive and focus
Exactly.
forward. You know what I mean? Don't look back. Never look
Yeah,
back. No
no
way
way
back.
back. Yeah.
So so now you come in nighttime and you find out that your lights is not working as well on your way of your journey as well. What was that experience driving at night with no lights or dim lights
Well, you
to
see,
you?
that's where the blind people would have been cool. Hey, this is cool, Terence, because whether it's nighttime or in daytime, that's what they see every day. Do you know? Just close your eyes for a minute,
This is
Nathan. Close your eyes like me. You can see nothing.
nothing. Yeah.
Now that's how people go through life. Now open your eyes. How blessed are we? How blessed are we? So
Oh, yeah.
getting back to the story of the lights. So Jeff was driving and he was getting close to the border of Botswana, and all of a sudden there's just like the engine died and there's no lights because we had one fuse that actually controlled all the electrics, and every now and then that was popping. So luckily we had spare fuses with us, but the fact that it
Mm-hmm.
was popping was showing that there was a bigger problem. But we couldn't
Mm.
try and work it out. We on the side of the road. Just put in the new shoes and off you go again. And we just kept doing that all the way through the journey, and
Yeah.
then um, the biggest issue with the lighting. Well, first of all, the lights were so useless anyway. It was hardly even worth switching them on. They were giving us lighting for about 20 meters, not 30 or 40 like a normal car. But anyway,
Wow.
going over the mountains in Bulgaria towards the border of Romania, that was hectic because we were going up a very steep hill in torrential rain in a huge thunderstorm. And then again, everything died. The car died, the lights died.
Wow.
And there we were in the pouring rain with our coach trying to fix this light. I'm holding the torch, and Jeff, I called him MacGyver Jeff eventually because he was always fixing things, like he was always making a plan out of nothing. And then he would be fixed. And then the fuse, the fuse box actually melted so bad on the one side. We actually had to rewire the fuse box to the other side to actually make it work. And we were worried that somebody was going to come across the mountain and come through the corner and hit into us. But luckily, clearly that didn't happen because I'm still alive. So we got it going again.
So,
But that was hectic, yeah. Hectic.
so I know you said that going through in Zimbabwe, I read a part where you actually they were pushing so much getting through the borders that you had to literally grab a child and pick him up and take him through there because you were afraid they were gonna crush him at the time.
You know what?
And
You reminded me of that. Now I had forgotten clean about that. You're absolutely right, Nathan. Yes, man, yeah. That was actually not in Zimbabwe. It was going from South Africa into Botswana, but
Botswana, okay.
all the guys going into Zimbabwe for the Easter
Mm-hmm.
weekend because it was Holy Thursday when we went. They were actually avoiding the Bait Bridge border, and they were going through the small border of Martin's Drift. That's why there was huge crowds of people. And you're right, there was a little kid, and I felt it. I mean, Jeff and I actually we were so scared that we were going to be separated by this. It was almost like a stampede. I
Mm-hmm.
actually grabbed Jeff around the shoulders and held on to him so that we didn't get separated in this mad push of humanity towards the glass doors. But there was a little kid. You're right, and I remember helping him. And I said, "Come on, let the kid through. Let the kid through." And then yeah. So that was good that you reminded me of that. Thank you.
Like I
Yeah.
said, I read the whole book.
Oh, you did, yeah. Maybe I should read my book again myself.
It's been a while, eh? It's been a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
You did have also failure with some ignition problem, thermal ignitions, and some fuel pumps.
We,
Botswana? Or was it Botswana? That's
yeah,
Botswana.
we actually we actually ended up saying that we were blessing Africa with petrol all the way through because our dual tanks weren't properly coordinated, synchronized, and they were spilling water onto spilling fuel onto the ground. So eventually,
Mm.
we tried to fix it on the side of the road in Botswana, and I ended up getting petrol in my eye, my good eye.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah. So,
and, and then MacGyver Jeff, he ended up pouring a bottle of spring water into my eye. So I called him Doctor MacGyver Jeff.
so
Eventually,
which eye did
uh,
it? This is the eye that you
the,
use.
the
This
good
one, the
eye.
good
Yeah,
eye.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
So jumping a little forward, you went from Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania. You said that there was a lot of police and they would stop you along the way over there.
You know,
How
a
was that
funny thing.
at Tanzania?
I must tell you something funny about Tanzania. They've got what's called a sleeping policeman. You know what a sleeping policeman is? It's a bump on the
No.
road. So you and you're carrying on, and the speed limit was like, let's say 50 kilometers an hour. And I said to them, I said, please, please, I've got an 800cc engine in my car. And by the time I just managed to get it up to about 50 kilometers an hour, then I've got to go to another speed bump and I've got to slow down again. I said, couldn't they just have pity on me just to let my car go a little bit over 70 kilometers an hour? So, oh, and then at one stage Jeff was driving, and he was pulled over by the police, and this policewoman says, "Congratulations, driver! You were doing over the speed. You were doing 50 kilometers an hour, and the speed limit is only 30 because we were passing around over passing a school." So
Oh,
I said,
wow.
"Oh, officer, please forgive us." And I got out of the car and I showed her the map of Africa on
Mm-hmm.
the front of the bonnet, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Look, we're trying to get all the way to England, and we got." And guess what? She was so nice. She said, "Go away, go away." So yeah, in actual fact, we were very lucky. We didn't get any speeding fines, any traffic violations at all on the entire journey because our car was too
Okay.
slow anyway.
The obstacles that you faced along your way, would you say Kenya was the place
most,
for you
most
that you
challenging.
most
It was
challenging part?
yeah, it was the most challenging by a long shot, a long shot, because before we did the trip, even a year before, I contacted the Department of Tourism, and I said, "You've got a road between Marsabit and Moyale. Marsabit in northern Kenya is the road into Ethiopia from Marsabit. It's 500 kilometers of dirt road." And they said, "Yes, that's passable in the dry season if you've got a very good 4x4. But in the wet season, you cannot get through. It's impassable." Guess when we
Mm,
went through? The wet season. Because these guys in England had set the date. So we couldn't change the date. We had to get there by
exactly.
the by the beginning of May. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
so we had about 500 kilometers of dirt road that became like a mud road. In fact, we were dragged through parts of it that it ended up being like a lake, and we were being pulled by a 4x4 through this. It was it was really it was mind blowing. The Red Cross were actually delivering food and drinks to people that were stuck on the road for already 4 or 5 days.
Wow. Wow.
So at that stage, I said to Jeff, I said, "Jeff, I think we've actually bitten off more than we can chew. I think we've realized that we actually are on a hiding second to nothing. Maybe we should turn back." And then we analyzed it and we said, "You know what? We've already come through half of the dirt road. For us to go back, it would probably be even more difficult. So I think let's proceed," is what Jeff said to me. So I said, "Okay, let's go. Let's go."
Yeah. What was communication like for you as you were like?
Do you remember the BlackBerry phones?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The BlackBerry phones, yes.
We were using the BBMs, the BlackBerry messaging. because that's what we were using for communication at the time. And every time we'd go to a restaurant, or if we go to an accommodation or a campsite, we would always ask if they have free Wi-Fi. Connect to the Wi-Fi, and then we
Yeah.
would communicate via Wi-Fi. But my partner also was clever, but he bought himself a world call card. So we were able to use a phone to dial home every now and then.
Okay.
That helped us. So eventually we actually were about 2 or 3 days in Kenya where we had no signal whatsoever.
Wow. Um, so going into Egypt, I understand that you took some couple of pictures there, and they kind of had you deleted.
Yeah, and actually, a very interesting thing happened there because we were going through to Port Said, north of Cairo, to catch the ferry, over to Turkey, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where the Suez Canal is. So I took pictures of the ships on the Suez Canal. You know, I'm a tourist. That's what I do, and I took a picture.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, the night before that, we had stayed in a hotel, and we actually managed to use the Wi-Fi and downloaded all the pictures from our camera onto our computer. So all the pictures we had taken up to that point, we had actually saved onto the computer. So then, when this guy pulled us over, he was a policeman dressed in like a naval, all white naval police, like a naval officer. So he said, "You're in trouble with me. You're South African, Egypt, good friends, but you are a problem." He wanted to arrest me because he said, "You took a photograph of the Suez Canal." I said, "Yes, officer, I did." He said, "But you know you're not allowed." I said, "I didn't know that." He said, "It's big signs." I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't read it properly." And he says, "Show me the photo." And I showed him the photograph of the ship. And he said, "Yes, you see, you come with me, come with me." I said, "No, please, officer, let me delete the photograph." And then in my panic, I deleted all the photographs that I had on my camera. But luckily, I had saved them on the computer the night before. The only one I lost was the one of the Suez Canal. Oh, no, sorry. I had also taken a picture of my car in front of the pyramids that morning.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And then because I didn't have a picture of my car in front of the pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
I I paid a painter called Chrissy Jensen to actually paint a picture of my car and the pyramids in the background to put in the book. And I've got that picture as well, because obviously we didn't have the real photograph. So I said, let's make a
Yeah.
picture. But
Yep.
you know what? Can I tell you an interesting part of the journey in Egypt? I mean, in Sudan,
Yeah.
we had the clutch break, and we had to drive for 200 kilometers using the gear lever without a clutch. So that was very difficult, but we managed to get into Khartoum, which is the main city in Sudan. Then we got into the campsite, and we removed the engine to see what the problem with the clutch was. We discovered what the problem with the clutch was. And guess who told me to put a new clutch and pressure plate in the car before I left? My 16-year-old son, Brendan. He said,
Really?
"Dad, take this, take this." I said, "No, Brendan, I don't want to take that. That's too heavy. I don't want to take it. I won't need it." And he said, "Dad, please take it." And I knew he was up. He was already a little bit sad that I was leaving for this very, very challenging journey. And he thought, let me try and help my dad. So I took it. Thank God I did, because if I didn't have that, we would never have made it out of Sudan.
Wow.
So we changed the clutch, put the engine back in, drove it around the campsite, and then a guy was walking past and he said, "What are you guys doing? Where are you from?" And I'm now busy with my hands full of oil putting the engine back in. And he said, "I'm not a mechanic, but is there anything I can do to help you guys?" And I said, no, 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 lying on the ground. No, oh, yes, we need money. Can you tell me where I can find an ATM? He said, an ATM? He said, do you have a bank account with a bank in Sudan? I said, no, no, we're going to use my Visa card. He said, but Visa doesn't work in Sudan. I said, oh, no. Well, and I'll use Jeff's MasterCard and then I'll refund him. He said, but MasterCard doesn't work. American Express doesn't work. Diners Club, we're outside of the banking system. I think you've got a problem. He said, how much money do you need? I said, well, I think it looks like we'll need about 400 to get to Egypt, 400 US dollars. And he said, how much do you have? And I said, well, the last time we counted, we had about 130. And I realized now I've told this guy how much money I've got. And I said, oh. So he said, I think you've got a problem. He said, but I said, don't worry. What I'll do is I'll just go to the bank in the morning and I'll draw the money cash. He said, but you can't do that. He says, the banks are not linked with your bank in South Africa. I said, he said, let me speak to my friends. I'm going to my friends across the campsite here. Maybe some of them who are in the banking can give me some, give you advice. So then about an hour later, a guy came to see me and he says, my friend, he wants to speak to you about money. So I said to myself, now he didn't come back. He sent his friend. So I knew that there was something fishy. So I went to him anyway, and I said, yes, my hands were still covered in oil and everything. And he said, I spoke to my friends here. They were all playing cards on the banks of the River Nile in the campsite. And he said, they said to me that there's no way you can get money. You will not get any money in the banks. He said, how much did you say you still needed? I said, about 300 US. And he says, well, please take this as a gift from the people of Sudan. He gave me three
Wow.
100. He gave me three $100 bills, US
Wow.
$100 bills, not 50s, not 20s. And you know what, Nathan? I was so overcome with emotion. I didn't know what to say. I said, sir, thank you, but what can we do for you? He said, just pray for us. And I didn't take his phone number. I didn't take his email address. And that's a regret that I have that
Wow.
I actually, that I just said thank you to this man. Three $100 bills. And we were
Wow.
still short of money, by the way. When I got to pay the guy in Wadi Halfa for the ferry and the barge, we were short by about a thousand rand or something like that. So he said, "Don't worry." He said, "Meet my friend in Aswan in Egypt, and give him the extra money, and he'll give it to me the next time he sees me." I said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you."
Wow.
I was mad.
And some challenges along the way, right? That
Huge,
cannot
huge.
be answered.
Yeah, it was very.
So, yep, you've been to Sudan, Egypt, next trip to Turkey. How was that trip towards Turkey?
Well, let me tell you, it was 18 hours on a beautiful ship. It was very, very
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, and it was a massive ship. So obviously, the water was like it was like glass. There wasn't a wave. It was just like beautiful. So it was
Wow.
really we managed to do. We ate a lot of meals on the boat. All the meals are included, and we ate
Oh,
like
nice.
kings. And then we slept as much as we could because we knew when
Mm-hmm.
we got into Turkey we were going to have to travel 4,500 kilometers from Iskenderun to Coventry non-stop, only stopping for fuel and stopping for food. And we did that.
Wow.
And in fact, in when the Hillman was being made in the 60s, they tried to drive it for 18 for 24 hours continuously
Mm-hmm.
as an endurance test, but they never managed to do it because the car crashed after 18 hours.
Wow.
So look what I did. I did it for them 50 years later.
Wow.
Uh,
So you ran in a bit of troubles in, I believe, Serbia. where the
Serbia, my
visa.
friend, yeah, Serbia, my friend wasn't allowed in because he only had a Schengen visa for Europe. But by then,
Mm-hmm,
I had changed from my South African passport to my Irish passport, so I was allowed in. But obviously,
mm-hmm,
we were going to go together. So when we came to the border, and the official said "niet, niet," which means you can't, no.
yeah.
Um, and then it's probably a good thing, Nathan, because you know immediately you think the negative. Why us? Why this drama? Why this problem? It was probably a good thing because if we'd managed to get in, if he had said to us, "Look, I'll do you a favor. I will let you come in," then we would have gone up to from Serbia into Croatia, and maybe Croatia would have said, "No, you're not coming through here."
Mm-hmm,
Or maybe Croatia would let us go through, and then you go through to Herzegovina, and then Herzegovina will say no, so they'll chase us back to Croatia, and Croatia will say, "Hold on, we only let you through because we were helping you, but now you're not coming back into Croatia again." We would have had huge problems. So again, the negative actually could have become a positive. So, but in spite of that, Jeff was really at a very, very low point on the trip at this point because we were very tired, undernourished, and I mean, I lost a huge amount of weight on that trip. I didn't realize that
mm-hmm,
until after the trip. And then Jeff told me many, many months later when we were turned back from the border of Serbia and we got back into Sofia again. It was only about 200 kilometers, I think, or maybe less. He said at that point he wanted to take a taxi to the airport and get his wife to buy a ticket and fly him back to South Africa. He wanted nothing more to do with that car. And anyway, he actually didn't do that, and we managed to get across into Hungary. We crossed the Danube in another barge. We got through to Austria. We had to meet a guy in the middle of the night in Austria to collect some more spare parts for the Hillman because we were running out of spare parts. And my guy, my friend in Cape Town, found out that the closest member of the Imp Club was this guy in Vienna. So after we traveled from Romania to Hungary, we went straight into Austria and we met this guy 9 o'clock at night outside the city hall of Vienna. And he gave us a couple of more spare parts for the car.
wow. So those last moments, or let's say last hours towards the end of the road, let's call it that.
Yeah,
What was that feeling, that emotional feeling? I'm sure you were both of you were very emotional at that point.
yeah.
Can you explain a little?
Well, let me tell you, when we got as far as Dover, we took a ferry from France to England, and when the ship docked in Dover in the southeast corner of England, Jeff drove the car for the first leg, which was from there to London, and then I was asleep in the passenger seat. And when he stopped the car outside London, he got out of the driver's seat, came over to the passenger door, opened the passenger door, and I'm sound asleep, and I'm looking up at this guy, exhausted. And he says, "We've done it." And I said, "Oh no, sir, what have we done? What have we done now? Have we done the gearbox? Have we done the engine? Is the engine going up? What's done?" He said, "No. Didn't you say Jolon, Johannesburg, London? Joe for Johannesburg, Lund for London?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, look, there's London. We've done it." And he gave me a massive hug, and that was I actually had tears in my eyes. I said, "This is amazing." He said, "Well, guess what?" He says, "I'm tired now. I'm sleeping. You're driving." So then, so this is about two o'clock or 2:30 in the morning outside London, cold on the 6th of May. And then I was driving up the highways towards Coventry, where the people said they will meet us at the petrol stop on the side of the highway, and the services on the side of the highway. They told us which service, which exit to take. So I'm driving up there now. It was about 3 hours journey. I'm sticking my head out the window to try and keep myself awake with the cold morning air because I was falling asleep. I was so exhausted. And then I realized that, you know what? I'm actually about to fall asleep at the wheel and I'm going to crash this car. I knew that there was no, and I said, we've done all the hard work. Why must I just throw it away now? Just because I want to have the comfort of closing my eyes. So I kept, what happened was in Egypt, I cut my elbow a little bit. I had a small cut on my elbow. And Nathan, I actually started pinching that to inflict pain on myself to keep myself awake. Wow. I kept doing that. And by the time I stopped, I still remember where there was actually blood on my fingertips and the wound. Not a lot of blood, but yeah. And I must tell you, when I stopped the car in that petrol station, it was 5:30 in the morning, I think 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and there was nobody around. The people hadn't arrived to meet us yet. And I switched off the car, and all I could hear was like the cracking of the engine when when the engine is hot and it starts to cool down. It's got these like little cracking noises, and then I could hear birds chirping, like birds waking up for the day, and Jeff sleeping, and not snoring, but you could hear his breathing, and I'm telling you, that was one of the most emotional parts of the journey for me. It was awesome. Even thinking back on it now, it was awesome.
Wow. Definitely, I think, like I said, your story definitely has a deeper meaning for our younger generation. Is never look back. Always obstacles in your way, you can overcome them. You know what I mean? It's if you just put your mind towards something. Your story definitely has that. So in London, what happened to the car?
Well, when I got to England, then obviously the guys gave us a very big welcome from the Imp Club, and I met members of the Imp Club that I had been in touch with only by email and phone calls. So I said to them, listen, I'm going to fly back to South Africa, and I'm going to leave the car with you. And then they suggested to me, why don't we enter it into the Car of the Year, the Classic Car of the Year competition? And I said, okay, we can do that. So we put together a 100-word story about what I did, where the car came from, and the car was then entered into this competition, and it got runner-up Classic Car of the Year that year. It was on display in the Classic Car Show in the National Exhibition Centre for 5 days, and it was and the guys from the Imp Club put a beautiful stand together. It was very, very well done, beautifully done.
Wow. And then next, where did the car end up?
Well, then the car was brought back to me in South Africa by ship a couple of years later, after about 2.5 years, and then it was well, we actually drove it from Port Elizabeth. We were driving it to Cape Town to do a couple of shows in Cape Town with it, and it broke down about 100 kilometers from Port Elizabeth. It blew a hole in the piston, so we had to put the car on a flatbed and bring it up to Johannesburg. So I decided to give it to a friend of mine to put it into his car museum in Franschhoek in the Cape. So that's where it is now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Terence, I think that was good. I think that was definitely a story to be told. I'm sure it's been told many times.
Yes.
But I'm glad that I had the opportunity to actually hear it from you. Thank you for your time once again.
Thank you very much for asking me the story and to share the story. And I never tire of speaking about it. I love telling the story because it was such a special opportunity. And maybe one of the things that probably was the biggest benefit that we had on the journey was the fact that I didn't do enough research. Because if I had done the research, I would have realized that it's impossible to get through in Kenya. It's too dangerous to go through Sudan. It's too much red tape to get through Egypt. And the journey from Turkey, you'll never make it in time. Guess what? We made all of them. So,
You
so
made all of them.
I think, yeah, you can actually achieve a lot more than you actually sometimes give yourself credit for. And by the
Exactly.
way, you must also buy a copy of my new book, by the way, Death by Angel's Tears.
Death by Angel Tears.
But I'll send
So
you the
you're
details.
gonna
Okay.